I have nowhere to go. Emily Carter whispered the words to a stranger's dark doorway, never imagining the man behind it would answer. Then come home. The rain had been falling for nearly an hour, turning the streets of Boston into ribbons of silver beneath the streetlights. Emily stood beneath the narrow awning of an old stone building, clutching the handle of a battered suitcase with one hand and holding her thin coat closed with the other. She was 27, exhausted, and carrying everything she owned in one small suitcase. 3 hours earlier, she had lost her job at a downtown restaurant. An hour after that, the woman who rented her the tiny room above a garage had told her the room was no longer available. Emily had asked for one more night. She had promised to pay the $180 she owed by Friday. The answer had still been no. So she walked 6 miles through the rain, 6 miles with nowhere waiting at the end. She could have called a friend, but the only friends she had left were people already struggling to keep their own lives together. Her phone showed 8% battery. Her bank account showed $23.17, and the last bus of the night had already passed. Emily lowered her eyes to the strange address scribbled on the old piece of paper in her pocket. She had found it inside a secondhand coat she bought that morning for $12. The address belonged to a mansion at the end of Blackwood Lane, a place she had never heard of before tonight. She had almost thrown the paper away. Almost. But something about the name had stopped her. Blackwood. Now, standing before an enormous iron gate, she wondered why she had come at all. Beyond the gate stood a sprawling estate of black stone, tall windows, and ancient trees bending beneath the storm. No porch light, no cars, no sign that anyone lived there, except for one golden light glowing behind a second-floor window. Emily looked down at her soaked shoes. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. She turned to leave. Then the gate opened by itself. Emily froze. Cold air moved through the trees. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a door unlocked with a quiet click. She should have walked away. Instead, she stepped through the gate. At the top of the stone steps stood a man dressed entirely in black. He was tall, still, and impossibly pale, his dark hair untouched by the rain. His face was sharper and whiter than anyone Emily had ever seen, almost luminous beneath the faint porch light. His eyes rested on her suitcase first, then on her tired face. Emily swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this is strange." The man said nothing. She tightened her grip on the suitcase. Pride told her to leave. Desperation told her to stay. Her voice broke. She took a breath. "I have nowhere to go." For the first time, something changed in his expression. The coldness remained, but beneath it was something older, something almost human. He stepped aside and opened the enormous door behind him. "Then come home." Emily stood frozen at the threshold, one hand still wrapped around the handle of her battered suitcase, while the stranger waited silently for her answer. Behind him, the mansion seemed to breathe with the quiet of another century. Warm golden light spilled across the marble floor, revealing walls lined with dark wood, old paintings, and towering windows blurred by rain. "Come home," Emily repeated softly. The words sounded almost absurd. She had never belonged anywhere long enough for those words to mean anything. The man studied her for another moment. "You are soaked," he said. His voice was deep, calm, and strangely gentle. "Come inside before you catch a cold." Emily hesitated. Every sensible thought told her not to enter a stranger's mansion in the middle of the night. Yet there was something about him that made the fear in her chest feel quieter. He did not move closer. He did not demand anything. He simply held the door open and waited. Finally, Emily stepped inside. The instant she crossed the threshold, warmth surrounded her. She released a breath she had not realized she was holding. The man closed the door behind her, shutting out the rain. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will only stay until morning." "You will stay as long as you need." Emily looked at him. "You do not even know me." A faint pause followed. "Perhaps not," he said. "But I know what it looks like when someone has nowhere left to turn." Something about that answer caught her off guard. She lowered her eyes. "I am Emily Carter. Alexander Blackwood." The name meant nothing to her. Not yet. Alexander reached toward a small table beside the staircase and picked up a folded towel. He offered it to her without another word. Emily accepted it and gently dried her wet hair. "There is a guest room upstairs," he said. "You can rest there tonight." She glanced toward the staircase. "What do you want in return?" Alexander became very still. Nothing. Emily gave a small, uncertain laugh. People do not usually open their homes to strangers for nothing. I am aware. He turned toward the hallway. Come. Emily followed, her suitcase wheels making a soft sound against the polished floor. As they walked, she noticed something strange. The house was enormous, but there were no photographs of ordinary family life. No recent mail. No television playing somewhere in the background. No sound of neighbors or traffic. Everything felt preserved, as though the house belonged to a different era. Then Emily noticed the portraits. Dozens of them. Men and women dressed in clothing from different generations stood inside heavy wooden frames. Yet the same dark-haired man appeared again and again. Emily stopped. Alexander. He turned. Who was that? She pointed to a portrait painted more than a century ago. The man in it had the same black hair, the same impossibly pale face, and the same silver-gray eyes. Alexander looked at the painting. His expression did not change. An ancestor, he said. Emily looked from the portrait to him. Something about the answer felt wrong. Before she could ask another question, a quiet sound came from somewhere deep inside the mansion. A bell. Once. Then twice. Alexander's expression hardened. Emily noticed immediately. What was that? He looked toward the dark hallway. Nothing you need to worry about. But for the first time since she entered the house, Emily saw something she had not expected in the eyes of the man who had opened his door to her. Concern. And somewhere beyond the walls, another bell began to ring. The third bell echoed through the mansion, and Emily felt the sound settle somewhere beneath her ribs. Alexander remained perfectly still, listening toward the distant hallway. Should I leave? Emily asked quietly. His eyes returned to her. No, the answer came too quickly. He seemed to realize it and softened his voice. You are safer here. Safer. The word made Emily glance toward the enormous front doors. From what? Alexander did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the old portraits lining the corridor. There are rules in this house, he finally said. Most of them exist for a reason. Emily gave a nervous smile. I am beginning to think I walked into a much stranger place than I expected. For the first time, the corner of Alexander's mouth lifted. It was barely a smile, but it changed his entire face. You have no idea. He continued toward the staircase, and Emily followed. But halfway up, she noticed something on the wall beside the railing. A small silver plaque had been placed beneath an old portrait. Unlike the others, this one contained only a single symbol. A circle surrounded by 4 delicate lines. Emily stopped. The symbol felt familiar. She did not know why. Have you seen this before? Alexander asked from above. Emily looked up. He was watching her carefully. I do not think so. Then why are you staring at it? She touched the edge of the plaque with one finger. I honestly do not know. The moment her fingertip came close to the symbol, the hallway lights flickered. Emily pulled her hand back. Alexander descended 2 steps in an instant. Do not touch it. His voice was calm, but firm. Emily stepped away. What is it? An old family seal. It reacted to me. Silence. Alexander looked at the symbol, then at Emily. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. That should not be possible. Emily folded her arms. You keep saying things like that. He studied her face. What do you mean? First, you let a complete stranger into your house. Then you have a portrait that looks exactly like you from more than 100 years ago. Then a bell rings in the middle of the night. And now your family symbol reacts when I touch it. She took a breath. I think I deserve at least one honest answer. Alexander looked almost amused. You are very direct. I am exhausted. Her voice softened. I do not have enough energy left to pretend I am not confused. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he walked to a nearby window and looked into the storm. My family has lived on this land for a very long time. How long? Longer than most people would believe. Emily stared at his reflection in the glass. Are you hiding something from me? Alexander turned. Yes. The honesty surprised her. Why? Because tonight you need shelter, not answers. Another bell sounded from the lower floor. This time, Emily noticed something different. The sound did not come from the mansion. It came from the small silver plaque. The symbol beneath her hand had begun to glow with a faint golden light. Alexander's expression changed completely. He crossed the distance between them, not touching her, but standing close enough to see the mark clearly. Emily, he said quietly, where did you get that coat? She looked down at the old coat she had been wearing since morning. I bought it at a thrift store today. Alexander's eyes narrowed. That coat belonged to someone in my family. Emily slowly reached into the pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper that had brought her to Blackwood Lane. Alexander saw the handwriting and went completely still. "Where did you find that?" he whispered. Emily looked at the address, then back at him. Inside the coat. The golden symbol brightened, and Alexander finally understood that Emily had not found his house by accident. Someone had sent her there. Alexander stared at the folded paper in Emily's hand as though it carried a memory he had spent decades trying to forget. The golden symbol on the wall faded slowly, leaving the hallway quiet again. Emily looked from the paper to him. "You know what this means." Alexander did not deny it. "I know what it could mean." "Then tell me." He reached for the paper, but stopped before touching it. "May I?" Emily handed it to him. His fingers closed around the old paper, and his expression changed when he saw the handwriting more clearly. "This was written by Eleanor Blackwood," he said. "My great-grandmother." Emily blinked. "But the writing looks old." "It is." He carefully unfolded the paper. On the inside was a short message written in faded black ink. Alexander read it silently. His eyes moved across the final line, and for the first time since Emily had met him, the certainty in his expression disappeared. "What does it say?" she asked. He looked at her. "If the girl carrying this message ever reaches Blackwood House, she must be welcomed without question." Emily's breath caught. "Girl." "Yes." "She knew someone like me would come?" Alexander nodded slowly. "Apparently." Emily looked toward the glowing symbol. "Why?" Alexander folded the paper again. "That is the question I have been trying to answer for a very long time." Emily frowned. "You said this was your family's seal." "It is." "And it reacted to me." "Yes." "So what happens now?" Alexander looked toward the dark staircase below. "Now I show you something." They walked deeper into the mansion. The rain continued against the windows, but the sound seemed distant now. Alexander led Emily through a long corridor filled with portraits and old books until they reached a pair of carved wooden doors. He placed his hand against one door, and it opened quietly. Inside was a library unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Shelves reached nearly to the ceiling, filled with books bound in leather, cloth, and faded paper. A large fireplace stood cold at the far end. On the central table rested an old family journal. Alexander opened it to a marked page. "This is the first record of the symbol," he said. Emily leaned closer. The same circle and 4 lines had been drawn in the margin. Beneath it was a sentence written in elegant handwriting. "When the forgotten heir returns, the house will open its doors." Emily read the words twice. "Forgotten heir?" Alexander's eyes remained on the page. "My family believed someone connected to the Blackwood bloodline would one day return." Emily shook her head. "That cannot be me. I am just Emily Carter." Alexander finally looked at her. Perhaps that is exactly what everyone was supposed to believe. A sudden warmth moved through Emily's hand. She looked down. A faint golden mark had appeared on her wrist, matching the ancient symbol. She stared at it, speechless. Alexander stepped back, his face pale even by his unnatural standards. "That mark has not appeared in this house for more than 200 years. Emily looked up. "Then why did it appear tonight?" Before Alexander could answer, a soft chime echoed through the library. The old journal opened by itself to another page. There, beneath a faded family crest, were 3 words that made Alexander's expression turn solemn. "She has returned." Emily felt the room grow strangely still. Alexander closed the journal and met her eyes. "Whatever happens next, Emily, you are not leaving this house alone." For several seconds, neither Emily nor Alexander spoke. The words in the journal seemed to remain suspended between them, heavier than the storm outside. "You are not leaving this house alone," Alexander repeated quietly. Emily looked at the mark on her wrist. The golden light had faded, but the symbol remained. "Alexander, I came here because I needed a place to sleep. I did not come looking for some ancient family secret." "I know. Then why does it feel like everyone else knew I was coming except me?" Alexander had no answer. Before he could respond, footsteps sounded beyond the library doors. Several sets. Slow. Measured. Alexander closed the journal and moved it beneath his arm. Emily noticed the change in his expression. "Who is that?" "People who believe this house should remain closed to you." The doors opened. 3 elegantly dressed figures stood in the corridor, accompanied by an older woman with silver hair and a calm, commanding presence. None of them looked surprised to see Emily. The older woman stepped forward. Alexander. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. You were told not to bring her inside. Emily glanced at Alexander. Who are they? He answered without looking away from the visitors. Members of the Blackwood Council. The older woman studied Emily from head to toe. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes stopped at the golden mark on Emily's wrist. So it is true. Emily pulled her sleeve over the mark. What is true? The woman looked at Alexander. You know what must happen. Alexander's voice became colder. Nothing must happen tonight. The old law does not agree. The old law does not know her. The woman took one step closer. That is precisely why she cannot remain here. Emily felt a quiet pressure building in the room. Not fear exactly. More like the sensation of standing at the edge of a decision that had already been made by people she had never met. I can leave, Emily said. Alexander turned toward her. No, the single word stopped her. He looked at her with an unexpected seriousness. You have spent tonight believing you have nowhere to go. You are not going back into the rain simply because people who do not know you are uncomfortable. The older woman sighed. You are allowing sympathy to cloud your judgment. Alexander's expression did not change. You mistake kindness for weakness. Silence followed. Emily looked at him differently now. The man who had seemed mysterious and distant was standing between her and an entire council, not because she had earned anything, but because he had given her his word. The older woman finally turned toward Emily. Do you understand what the mark means? Emily shook her head. No. Then you should understand why you cannot stay. She paused. That symbol belongs to a bloodline that disappeared more than 2 centuries ago. Emily stared at her. But my last name is Carter. Names can be changed. Alexander's eyes narrowed. The woman continued. The question is not whether you belong to the Blackwood line. The question is who wanted you to believe you did not. Emily felt the room become silent again. She looked at Alexander. You said someone sent me here. He nodded. Yes. Do you know who? Not yet. The older woman turned toward the hallway. Then perhaps we should find out before sunrise. Emily looked toward the tall windows. The storm was beginning to weaken. Dawn was still several hours away. Alexander closed his hand around the old journal. No one leaves this library until we understand the message. The woman stopped at the doorway. Be careful, Alexander. If the girl truly carries the forgotten bloodline, opening your door to her may have awakened something your family spent generations keeping asleep. Emily looked down at the mark on her wrist. For the first time, she wondered whether finding Blackwood House had been a rescue at all, or the beginning of a destiny she had never known existed. The library remained silent after the council member left. Emily stood beside the long wooden table, staring at the golden mark on her wrist. Something your family spent generations keeping asleep, she repeated. What does that mean? Alexander looked toward the closed doors. It means my family has always believed there are things better left forgotten. And you? Emily asked. Do you believe that? Alexander was quiet for a moment. I used to. He opened the old journal again and turned several pages until he reached a section filled with faded handwriting. My great-grandmother wrote about a woman who appeared at Blackwood House more than 200 years ago. Emily leaned closer. What happened to her? She left before sunrise. Why? The records do not say. Alexander pointed to another line. But they mention the same symbol. Emily studied the page. Was she a Carter? The name was never recorded. Emily's heart sank. Then how do you know I am connected to her? Alexander looked at her wrist. Because of the mark. He turned another page. A detailed drawing appeared beneath several lines of text. It showed the same circle and 4 delicate lines. Beneath the drawing were words written in an older hand. The mark appears only when the heir returns to the house. Emily stared at the sentence. Heir to what? Alexander closed the journal halfway. That is what we need to discover. A quiet knock came from the library door. The older woman from the council entered again, but this time she carried a small wooden box. She placed it on the table between them. This belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, she said. Alexander looked surprised. You kept it? For 200 years. She opened the box. Inside was an old silver key, a faded photograph, and a small envelope sealed with dark red wax. Emily looked at the photograph first. It showed a young woman standing beside the entrance of Blackwood House. Emily's breath caught. The woman had the same light eyes, the same delicate features, and the same small mark near her wrist. "She looks like me," Emily whispered. The council member nodded. Her name was Clara Carter. Emily looked up sharply. "Carter." Alexander took the photograph carefully. "That changes everything." The woman pointed toward the sealed envelope. "There is more." Alexander broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His eyes moved across the page slowly. Then he stopped. "What does it say?" Emily asked. He looked at her. "It says Clara was not the last heir." Emily felt her pulse quicken. Who was supposed to come after her? Alexander lowered the letter. "Her daughter." Emily shook her head. "I do not know anything about her." The council member answered quietly. "Perhaps your family made certain you would not." Emily looked down at the mark again. A faint warmth moved beneath her skin. The silver key inside the box began to glow softly. Alexander noticed immediately. He reached toward it, then stopped. "It is responding to you." Emily looked at him. "What does the key open?" Before Alexander could answer, the library doors opened by themselves. Beyond them stood a narrow hallway that Emily had not seen before. At its far end was a single locked door. Above it was the same ancient symbol. The silver key lifted slightly from the box, as though drawn toward the door. Alexander stared into the hidden passage. "That room has been sealed since Clara disappeared." Emily looked at him. "Then maybe it was waiting for me." Alexander met her eyes. For the first time, he did not tell her to stay away. Instead, he picked up the key and held it out to her. "Then we find out what your family left behind." Emily took the silver key from Alexander's hand, surprised by how warm it felt against her palm. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hidden hallway waited in silence, its walls covered in faded portraits that seemed to watch them pass. Alexander walked beside her as they approached the sealed door. "If this room has been closed for 200 years, Emily whispered, "why would it open now?" "That is what worries me," Alexander replied. They stopped in front of the ancient symbol carved into the wood. Emily lifted the key toward the lock. Before she could touch it, the symbol began to glow. The key turned by itself in her hand. A quiet click echoed through the hallway. The door opened slowly, revealing a small chamber filled with dust, old furniture, and moonlight from a narrow window. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet Emily felt an immediate sense of recognition. "I have been here before," she whispered. Alexander looked at her. "That is impossible." Emily stepped inside. "I know, but it feels familiar." On the far wall hung a large painting covered by a white cloth. Beneath it stood a wooden desk with several old boxes arranged neatly across its surface. Emily walked toward the desk. One box had a name written across the lid. Clara Carter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she touched it. Alexander remained several feet behind her, giving her space. "Open it," he said. Emily lifted the lid. Inside were letters, a small silver pendant, and a photograph of Clara holding a baby. Emily stared at the photograph. "That baby." Alexander leaned closer. "Look at the pendant." The necklace in the photograph carried the same circle and 4 lines as the mark on Emily's wrist. Emily picked up the actual pendant from the box. The moment she touched it, the golden mark on her wrist became brighter. Alexander's eyes widened. "There is something written on the back." Emily turned the pendant over. Tiny letters had been engraved into the silver. "For the daughter who returns home." Emily's eyes filled with emotion. "My family knew this place." Alexander nodded. "More than that, they were welcomed here." Emily looked at the photograph again. "Then why did they leave?" Alexander studied the letters scattered across the desk. "Maybe they were asked to." Emily looked at him. "By whom?" Before he could answer, a folded document slipped from beneath the photograph. Alexander caught it before it reached the floor. He opened it carefully. His expression became distant as he read. "What is it?" Emily asked. He looked up. "It is a record of an agreement between Clara Carter and the Blackwood family." Emily stepped closer. "What agreement?" Alexander handed her the document. She read the first line and felt her breath catch. Clara had not simply lived at Blackwood House. She had been protected by the Blackwood family under an ancient promise. And the promise contained one condition. The heir must remain hidden until the door recognizes her. Emily looked at the open doorway. "The door recognized me." Alexander nodded. "Yes." She turned another page. At the bottom was a final sentence written in Clara's handwriting. "When my descendant returns, she must be given a choice." Emily looked at Alexander. A choice between what? Alexander's answer was quiet. Leaving this world behind, or becoming part of it. Emily stared at him, stunned. Then the old house bell rang once again. This time, every light in the hidden chamber came on at once. Beneath the covered painting, a faint golden glow appeared. Emily slowly reached for the cloth. Alexander did not stop her. She pulled it away, revealing a portrait of Clara Carter standing beside a much younger Alexander Blackwood. Emily stared at the painting. Alexander's face remained unchanged, but his eyes held a memory he could no longer hide. "You knew her?" Emily whispered. Alexander finally nodded. "I did." Alexander's confession seemed to change the air inside the hidden chamber. Emily looked from him to the portrait again, unable to reconcile the man standing beside her with the figure painted beside Clara Carter more than 200 years ago. "You knew her?" Emily repeated. Alexander nodded slowly. "Clara was the first human I ever trusted with the truth about my family." Emily looked at the portrait. "How long ago was this?" 217 years. "And you remember her?" A quiet sadness crossed his face. "I remember everything." Emily lowered her eyes to the pendant in her hand. "Then tell me what happened." Alexander walked toward the portrait, but stopped before touching it. "Clara came to this house when she was 24. She was frightened, alone, and carrying a secret she did not understand." Emily looked at him. "Like me. Very much like you." He paused. "She had the same mark, the same pendant, the same connection to this house." Emily's voice became softer. "What happened to her?" Alexander looked toward the old window. "She chose to leave." "Why?" "Because the world she discovered here was too complicated. She wanted an ordinary life." Emily nodded slowly. "And did she get one?" Alexander's expression softened. "For a while." The answer carried a sadness that made Emily understand there was more to the story. What changed? Her family discovered the truth about her connection to Blackwood House. They believed she should never have been allowed to know about us. Emily looked at him. "The council? Some of them." He turned toward her. But Clara was not forced to stay. She was given the same choice written in the agreement. Emily looked down at the words. "Leave this world behind, or become part of it." "Yes." "And she left." "Yes." Emily was silent for several seconds. Then she asked, "Why did she send me here?" Alexander's eyes moved to the old photograph. "Because she knew one day someone from her family would need this house again." Emily looked at the pendant. "So you knew this could happen?" "I knew it was possible. I never knew when." A faint sound came from the hallway. The council member appeared in the doorway once more, but this time she looked concerned. "Alexander, the council has reached a decision." He turned. "What decision?" "They want the girl removed from Blackwood House before sunrise." Emily felt her stomach tighten. Alexander's expression became calm. "On what grounds?" "The old law." "The old law does not apply to her." "You know that is not true." Alexander stepped toward the doorway. "Then bring me the exact wording." The woman hesitated. "Alexander, bring me the law." She finally nodded and disappeared. Emily looked at him. "You do not have to keep defending me." He turned toward her. "I gave you shelter. You gave me more than that." Alexander was quiet. "You gave me a chance to believe I was not invisible," Emily continued. "But I do not want your world to fall apart because I walked through your door." His expression softened. "Emily, my world was already changing the moment that door opened." She looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed through the mansion. The council returned carrying an ancient book bound in dark leather. They placed it on the library table and opened it to a marked page. Alexander read the passage carefully. Then he looked up with unexpected certainty. "You have misunderstood the law." The council member frowned. "How?" Alexander pointed to a single sentence. "It does not say the heir must leave." He looked at Emily. "It says the heir must be offered protection until she chooses her own path." Emily stared at the page. The room became completely silent. Alexander closed the book. "And she has already chosen." The council member looked at Emily. "What has she chosen?" Emily looked toward the open library doors, then at the rain fading beyond the windows. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like she was running away from somewhere. She looked at Alexander and answered quietly, "I choose to stay until I understand why I was brought here." Emily's words settled over the room with surprising certainty. She had expected fear to return the moment she made her choice, but instead she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Alexander watched her quietly, as though he understood how difficult those words had been for her. Then you will stay, he said. The council member closed the ancient law book and gave a reluctant nod. Until the matter is resolved. Alexander answered. She will stay under my protection. Emily looked at him. I can take care of myself. A faint smile appeared on his face. I believe you. The council slowly withdrew, leaving the library quiet once again. Outside, the storm had finally weakened to a soft drizzle. The darkness beyond the windows was beginning to turn gray. Dawn was approaching. Emily walked toward the window and watched the first pale light touch the distant trees. I came here thinking I had lost everything, she said. And now I find out I may have inherited something I never knew existed. Alexander stood several feet behind her. Sometimes losing the life you expected is how another life finds you. Emily turned toward him. Do you really believe that? I do now. She smiled faintly. You sound different than you did when I arrived. Alexander looked toward the open library door. You have been here less than one night. And somehow everything changed. Yes. Emily glanced at the old portrait of Clara. What happens after sunrise? Alexander looked at the golden mark on her wrist. We begin looking for answers. Where? Your family records. The place where Clara lived after leaving this house. The people who knew her. And the reason she hid your connection to Blackwood. Emily nodded. That sounds like a lot. It is. She smiled. Good. I was starting to think my life could not get any stranger. Alexander almost laughed. Almost. Then the silver pendant in Emily's hand grew warm again. She looked down. A tiny line of light appeared across its surface, forming a symbol neither of them had seen before. Alexander stepped closer. That was not in Clara's records. Emily studied the new symbol. What does it mean? He shook his head. I do not know. The pendant suddenly opened at its center, revealing a tiny folded piece of paper hidden inside. Emily carefully removed it and unfolded the paper. Only one sentence was written there. When she enters the house, the king must remember why he opened the door. Emily looked up at Alexander. He had gone completely still. What does that mean? She asked. He looked toward the portrait of Clara. It means she knew this day would come. Emily folded the message carefully. And why did you open the door? Alexander looked at her for a long moment. At first, because you needed somewhere to go. He paused. But now I think there was another reason. What reason? Because something in me recognized you before I understood why. Emily felt the weight of those words, but before she could answer, the first sunlight entered the room. The golden mark on her wrist faded to a soft glow. The mansion became strangely peaceful. Alexander walked to the front doors and opened the curtains. Morning light filled the entrance hall. Emily looked at the enormous house, then at the suitcase she had left near the stairs. It suddenly seemed very small. Yesterday, she had believed home was something other people had. Tonight, she had discovered that home could be a door opened by a stranger, a promise freely given, and a place where someone finally said, "You can stay." Alexander looked back at her. "Welcome home, Emily." She smiled. But neither of them noticed the faint golden symbol appearing once more on the old Blackwood family crest above the entrance. And beneath it, hidden behind the stone, another door had quietly unlocked.